is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Payne.
OK, so this is another plan. I mean, it's a kind of threat, and whether it would actually be taken on board, I'm not sure. It's a last resort, they say. What am I talking about? I'm talking about this idea that because there's not enough funding from the government, according to the Headteachers Union, to actually provide everything that people need to provide to children, that they may have to actually cut the amount of work they do to a 4.5-day week rather than a 5-day week. So let me go through the facts again, because they're both right, and this is why this is very confusing. But I've done some research on this. So, and this is true. The Headteachers Union say the government is not listening to their problems. They don't have the capacity to make the cuts they're being asked to make. The government says, well, hold on a minute. School funding has never been higher, and the funding will rise to £41 billion in the next year. All true. Never been so much. But the fact is that even though there is a record amount of money in that pot, the schools are still having to cut their budgets because there are more people now going to school, rising pupil numbers. Literally, there are more people. There's more population. Inflation hasn't been taken into account. And the running costs mean that schools now will actually have to cut approximately 8% from their budgets. So if you're cutting 8% from your budgets, how about cutting 8% of your working week, approximately? The head teachers say the 4.5-day week is the very last resort, but they've been forced into a corner. I was going to ask if you're a pupil what you think, but I should think you think it's a marvellous idea to only have 4.5 days in your week. But anyway, we're not going to consult you. Bad luck. But what about the rest of us? I would like to hear from parents. I would like to hear from teachers. If you're a teacher, would you be prepared to work less? Probably not, but when push comes to shove, you've got to make the government listening, because at the moment they're just putting their hands in their ears and going, la, 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 we're not listening to you. What other options not literally like that, what other options should be considered by the teachers and the head teachers to try and either get the message across or just literally try and save money? The last time I had this conversation, I had a very interesting conversation with a couple of teachers who literally bought provisions for their kids in their class because there wasn't enough money to go around. So, for example, if they needed a piece of equipment or they needed pens or they needed the odd textbook, they would actually have to buy them. And there was one lady said she was spending about £80 a week to provide for her. And, not like teachers are paid an awful amount. So if you're a teacher, is this a last resort? Would you consider working 4.5 days? How do you make the government listen? Because the facts are, yes, the government's paying more than it's ever done before into the pot, but because of those reasons that are listed, it's actually a shortfall. And head teachers are going to have to find, and it's they that are going to do it, we're going to have to find cuts of 8% in their budget. How do you do that? How do you make the government listen? Blah, blah, blah. But also, if there's anyone out there, and every time I ask a question like this, I always get a reply, so please don't let me down. I've got a 100% record. If teachers do this unilaterally, are the teachers allowed to decide how long their working week is? I mean, what is the legislation on this? I'm a bit hazy about it. Any experts out there that can tell me? Could teachers take this form of action, or would that be illegal? 0345 6060 973. Let's hear from the teacher's point of view. Lorrae Yadderberg is a former deputy head teacher and founder and co-manager director of JK Educate, which is an educational consultancy. Are you in favour of a 4.5-day week?
No, definitely not.
Why not?
Well, first of all, we have to go back to what you said before, that the heads are desperately exploring options. And this is, in a way, a tactic to try and make parents listen as well. So they will put some pressure on their MPs and the government to reverse this decision to impose these cuts. Because they also have an idea where they would refuse to submit budgets to the LA or the Education Funding Agency, which would put them in breach of contract. And again, this type of action would create chaos, but actually they couldn't replace all of the head teachers if all of them decided to do it. And they're also thinking about permitting schools to run a deficit budget, which again would be very serious. head teachers would be very hard pressed to do anything that would impact children and parents. But it is already happening. Some schools are already in deficit budget. I would definitely not be in favour of a 4.5-day week, because it's not a viable long-term solution. There will be losses for parents and children. The curriculum is already squeezed, and it will put a lot of pressure on parents to cover those costs of the extra half-day besides anything else.
It's unlikely that the government is going to change its mind on funding. How do the teachers make the government listen to them, or is it impossible?
I think that the Association of Head Teachers is going to be discussing this at their executive conference in June, and I think they will push forward with some of these ideas, and I think parents need to be listening and putting pressure on the government, because at the end of the day, it's the parents who are going to suffer and the children. If we are going to go in the right direction, this is not it. If we want a world-class education, this is not it. We need to be realistic about what we can achieve. And at the moment, the government are not being realistic about what they're going to achieve through making these cuts. We are seeing, as an educational consultancy, teachers coming to us for jobs because they are last in, first out in schools. And the sort of jobs that are going are the support, the intervention, the group work. This is for children who are vulnerable, special educational needs children, and so on. And I think this is the beginning of a very, very serious situation, which is just getting worse.
And what's the end result if nothing's done?
If nothing's done, we are not going to have a world-class education. We are going to have a very second-rate education.
Thank you for talking to us. That was Lorrae Yaderberg, who's a former deputy head teacher. So